Right, now our next speaker is Leonie Watson. She's worked as Director of Accessibility at Nementa for many years, and she is now a Senior Accessibility Engineer with the Paciello Group and owner of LJ Watson Consulting. Amongst other things, she's the chair of the British Computer Association of the Blind, BCAB, writes for .NET Magazine, and is a member of the W3C HTML Working Group and HTML Accessibility Task Force. She even appears every now and then on TV and radio to talk about technology. And with that, over to you, Leonie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pat. Hopefully coming through loud and clear to everybody. Okay. Well, it's great to be amongst such good company with all the people who've contributed time to put together talks for Global Accessibility Awareness Day and Inclusive Design 24. For my part, I'd like to offer you a rock and roll guide to HTML5 and ARIA. I was going to weave some actual music clips into this talk, but in the interest of not mixing technology, screen readers, talking, and music, I'm afraid there are just a few references scattered through the presentation to some really good rock and roll tracks. So if the code stuff gets too much, you can always kick back and go and listen to some tunes instead, but hopefully that won't be the case. So things I'd like to cover in the next 3/4 of an hour or so. I'd like to look at the web accessibility stack, the technologies that come together to create accessible user experiences. I'd like to look at ARIA itself as a specification and what that involves, and then some practicalities, look at some design patterns for HTML5 and ARIA that I hope will cover some situations that those of you who are developers will probably see on a pretty regular basis. So let's start off with my stairway to heaven, the web accessibility stack. I call it my stairway to heaven because if it all comes together and everything works with your help as developers, then we can start to look at some really heavenly user experiences for people. But let's take a look at the underlying technology first. Version 1 of the web accessibility stack looked a bit like this. At the bottom, we had the browser and its document object model, the DOM, that it created when the page was presented. And then on top of that sat assistive technologies like screen readers, screen magnifiers, speech recognition tools. And to get any information about the web page, what those tools had to do was to scrape the DOM. It's a horribly inefficient way of getting at information, leaves a lot open to interpretation by the different tools. Generally not a very good way to go about doing things at all. And so the web accessibility stack evolved, and between the browser DOM and the assistive technologies, accessibility APIs were introduced, and these created a platform-independent way for assistive technologies to be able to query information that browsers exposed from the DOM. So a browser would support something, it would then expose information about that through its accessibility API, and the assistive technologies like screen readers could make use of a whole bunch of properties and methods to pick up and use that information. So things became a lot more reliable and certainly a lot more efficient. And for the most part, this is what a lot, certainly of screen readers, are choosing to do now in terms of how they get information. There are exceptions, it's not a perfect world, but this is where we're definitely encouraging the stack to be. And then the stack as it stands at the moment introduces another factor, and that's ARIA, or Accessible Rich Internet Applications. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but what ARIA does in a simple sense is update or enhance the information that the browser exposes through its accessibility API. So it, in some cases, makes a little bit more information available to assistive technologies, and in other cases, maybe changes that information for the better, as we'll see. So what about ARIA? Well, it's a kind of magic because it's a really powerful specification when used properly, and it can do some quite remarkable things. It's a W3C specification. 1.0 is the current version, and it might surprise you to learn that that was only formally released as a recommendation just a few weeks ago, back in March. We've all been using it for a number of years, though, so that was more a formality. Work on 1.1 version of the spec is already underway, and it's a public working draft, so if you're curious, you can take a look at that on the web, and there are links to that in the notes for these slides if you pick them up later after the talk. So what does ARIA do? Well, it contains or defines a number of roles, around 30 in the current specification. And these roles enable you to define what an element or a custom widget does. We'll look more at roles in a bit, but on screen you can just see a few of the different roles that are available. Alerts, menu bars, checkboxes, buttons, a whole bunch of things to help you determine or define what the role of your custom widgets or elements are. It also defines a small number of states. So these give you the ability to let assistive technology users know what, as it sounds, state something is in. So it might be ARIA busy, ARIA checked, a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. And here you'll start to see the ARIA dash prefix for attributes in ARIA. So you'll know without doubt that you're dealing with some ARIA if you see that ARIA dash before the attribute name. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, that's pretty much convention through the ARIA specification. ARIA also defines a number of properties, and around 20 or so of these. Things like ARIA controls, ARIA live, ARIA active descendant, and these enable you to do things like define relationships between elements. So when you're developing custom widgets, you can associate things that are perhaps separated in the DOM and create those relationships where they don't necessarily exist in the HTML itself. Something else the ARIA specification does is to extend the capability of the tab index attribute. And there are now 3 ways that you can use tab index. You can give it a value of 0, and if you give an element a tab index of 0, it'll place it into the natural content order of the page. So if you're a keyboard user and you're using the tab key to move through content, you'll hit an element with a tab index of 0 at the point it appears in the source order of the page. So it's a very natural way to do it. It's a very good way to do it. If something needs to be focused on, inject it into the natural tab sequence of the page for best effect. You can also give an element a tab index value of -1. This won't add it to the tab sequence of the page. So if someone uses the tab key to move through the page, it'll be ignored. Focus won't land on that particular element. But it does mean that you can set focus to it programmatically. So a good example perhaps might be an alert or an error message appearing at the top of the form once it's been submitted.
We just lost audio there, Leonie. You can hear me? Oops. Right, hang tight, everybody. We're going to see if we can troubleshoot Leonie's problem with the connection. I'm hoping that Leonie actually realizes that her connection dropped, because I think she's turned off any other interfering program on her machine. So I really hope that she's not going for the next 40 minutes without actually casting. Oh, yeah, she's back online.
What this
Right, we can hear you again, Leonie.
Okay, just bear with me a second. All the times for my internet connection to die.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, slides back.
Yep, we're exactly where you left off.
So where did you lose me?
If you could just restart here with extending the tab index idea, I think that's roughly where we lost you.
No worries. Okay, let's try that again. Something else that ARIA does is extend the tab index attributes capability. So we now have 3 possible ways to use the tab index attribute. If you give it a value of 0, that'll add the element into the natural tab sequence of the page. So a keyboard user using the tab key to move through the page will focus on the element with tab index of 0 at the point it appears in the source order of the page. So it's a very natural, intuitive way to add a focusable element to your page. If you give it a value of -1, the element isn't added to the natural tab sequence of the page, but it can be focused on programmatically. So, for example, if you are putting some errors after a form submission on the page, you might want to take keyboard focus to it to ensure that keyboard and screen reader users were aware that the errors had been posted to the page. That would be a good example of where tab index -1 would be useful. The third value is to use a positive number. I really wouldn't advise using this at all because it creates an unnatural tab order to the page. So to take a quick example, if you had a page with, say, 20 links on, and the 15th link you set a tab index of 1, a sighted keyboard user coming to the page would start at the top, hit the tab key, expecting to reach the first link on the page, but instead would find their focus deposited at the 15th link instead. Major trouble if they wanted to get back up the page to any of the preceding links. It really does just make for a lousy keyboard experience. So generally speaking, avoid positive number values for tab index. So why ARIA? Why was the specification put together? Why was it necessary? To describe this, I have to just say, well, welcome to my nightmare as a screen reader user. If you take some native HTML, you find that the accessibility, by and large, is pretty good. And one thing that most HTML elements have is a role. We know what the HTML elements do. Assistive technologies know what they do, browsers know what they do, and it all comes together. So if we take this really simple example on screen, it's just a common garden variety A link. And in terms of how it works in terms of the accessibility stack, the browser renders that in the DOM. It exposes information about it through the accessibility API, and that information says that this element has a role of link. The assistive technology picks up on that information and conveys it to the user. The user knows what to do with the link, and we're all good to go. So native HTML is a really good place to start, probably one of the cornerstones of good accessibility. But then you get what I call creative HTML, and that's probably putting it politely, when people either repurpose elements, perhaps like span or div, that don't really have any semantic meaning in their own right, and create widgets or other bits and pieces out of those elements. And on screen here, we've just got a span element that's been given on-click functionality to have some kind of behavior, but otherwise has no accessibility at all. And we'll look more at this in just a second. So ARIA came along to really try and fix some of these problems and to enable developers to create custom widgets and do some of the stuff that they're doing already without losing out on accessibility. So let's dance. Let's take a look at a bit of ARIA in action. We'll take that same example here again. We've got a span that's just got some JavaScript functionality. So from a mouse user's point of view, it's probably good. You can take a look at this span, you can click on it, and something will probably happen. But from a keyboard user's point of view, you can't focus on that piece of text. From a screen reader user's point of view, you've got no idea that it has any functionality. It just appears like plain text. So chances are you're going to miss out on it one way or the other unless you're a sighted mouse user. So with a bit of ARIA, we can add in a role. The role attribute is one of those I mentioned that doesn't use the ARIA dash prefix. But it's very simple, and in this case we've just added a role of button to that span. So what happens now is if you use an assistive technology like a screen reader, you'll identify that element as a button. So that information is now being exposed through the Accessibility API as a link, but ARIA is changing that information and telling the assistive technology it's actually a button. It's worth mentioning at this point that screen readers are the only assistive technologies with any substantial ARIA support at all. So if I tend to defer to mentioning screen readers specifically here on in, that's pretty much why. Sadly, speech recognition tools and others really haven't been quite as quick to pick up on the advantages of ARIA. Going back to the example, so although a screen reader now recognizes that this is a button and that conveys a certain amount of information about it, it still can't be focused on. So we're still missing out here, but we can add focus by using the tab index and giving it a value of 0, which you'll recall I said means that we'll place this element into the natural tab sequence of the page. So now keyboard users, whether they use a screen reader or not, can focus on this. A screen reader knows it's a button, but there's still one piece of the puzzle that's missing. We need to add keyboard support. It's a common misconception that ARIA adds functionality. It doesn't. It just changes the information that's available to assistive technologies from the browser. You still need to add the functionality for your widget or for your, in this case, pseudo button. And when you're thinking about adding that functionality, it's really important that you add in the keyboard handling as well. I owe a slight apology to Patrick, who very kindly gave me a code snippet for the JavaScript for key handling for this, and I didn't have time to add it into my slides, but I'll post it afterwards. In this particular example, what you'd need to do is make sure that someone using a keyboard could activate the button using Enter key or spacebar and take it from there. So two things to think about in your scripting is that A, you need to provide the functionality, and B, you need to make sure that functionality works with different devices. Okay, so let's take a look at some design patterns, and these I think cover some of the scenarios that we probably come up against every day. I'm going to attempt to show you, or at least play you, some screen reader examples of the experiences as well. So hopefully that'll all come together without too much technical friction. The first thing I'd like to look at is details and summary, two elements that were introduced in HTML5 and which create a disclosure widget. That means you can toggle the display of additional content on the page. So here's the basic HTML. We've just got the details element, tucked inside it a summary element, and it says favorite Pink Floyd, and then inside a space where we'd add some additional content before the details element is closed. Now this is how a screen reader would probably report this content.
Favorite Pink Floyd.
Now, I hope that came across okay, but if it didn't, all it says was favorite Pink Floyd. Just treats it like a piece of plain text. There's no indication that you can interact with it, press it, hit it, that any content will appear. No, nothing. So we need to do some stuff to fix that. We can add in some ARIA roles, and just a couple here. We've added a role of group to the details element, and that just tells assistive technologies that the elements contained within that element all relate to each other, come together for some purpose. Group isn't widely supported by screen readers at present, but there's certainly no harm in adding it now for future proofing, because ARIA support is accelerating amongst screen readers pretty much on a daily basis. The other element is our favorite role of button. Comes in very handy, that role. And we're adding in that to the summary element. So a screen reader now knows that it's a button, and therefore that they can interact with it.
Favorite Pink Floyd button.
And again there, so now a screen reader user will hear something like favorite Pink Floyd button. And so suddenly for that one little role, a screen reader user is aware that there's a button. Pretty much we know what to do with buttons. You can press them and we expect something to happen. Question is, what's going to happen? And here we can use a bit more ARIA to make that more evident in the ARIA expanded attribute on the details element. And this will just inform a screen reader user what the state of that button is. So has the content been expanded, or is it collapsed at present? And here's the difference.
Favorite Pink Floyd button expanded.
And so now, not only do we know it's a button, but we know that the button's active and that something has been expanded. And from a screen reader user's point of view, that just gives us enough of a cue then to kind of explore on down the page and find the content. Or conversely, if we came to that button and the content wasn't expanded, we'd be told as much, which would tell us what to expect when we activated the button. So really simple stuff, all about informing screen readers exactly what's available, what's possible, and what's happening on the page. So take another solid gold, easy action example, and that's looking at a main page design pattern. To do this, I want to go back a little bit to some HTML4. And on screen, we've just got 3 divs, each representing in turn a header, the main content area of a page, and the footer. Incredibly simplified, of course, for the purposes of putting stuff on a slide, but a pretty typical design pattern from HTML4 days. This is what happens when a screen reader user encounters this code. That's it. Absolutely nothing at all. Div is a semantically neutral element, and screen readers, by and large, will ignore it. They won't convey any information about it to the user. So back in the HTML4, pre-ARIA, pre-HTML5 days, there was no way for a screen reader user to really understand or identify the key regions within a page. ARIA landmark roles are the answer. Landmark roles are a subset of the wider role taxonomy defined in ARIA, and there's a handful of them, each one corresponding to a main area of the page. Sorry, that was a slightly strange way to phrase it, to a high-level area of the page. So we've extended it now so that the div representing the header has a role of banner, the div representing the main content area has a role of main, and the div representing the footer has a role of content info. There are many more landmark roles for things like search and navigation, but these are just 3 quick examples. And this is the difference it makes to the screen reader.
Banner, banner end, main region end, content information end.
And so by adding in those roles, we've enabled the screen reader to understand that each of those divs represents a key region of the page, and it'll announce, as you heard, the start and the finish of each of those regions. When you understand that a lot of screen readers now have a shortcut key that lets you cycle quickly from one landmark on the page to the next, you suddenly realize that what screen reader users have is a way to really quickly understand the major components of a page. So something that sighted people can take in at a glance just by looking at the page, it's now much more possible for a screen reader user to do something similar by bouncing quickly from one landmark to the other to find out which are the key components involved on the page. So what happens when we get to HTML5? Well, lots of new elements, of course, were introduced. In this case, for our example, we've got the header, the main, and footer elements. Something interesting happens here, and this is how a screen reader would treat this code with no additional ARIA.
Banner, banner end, main region end, content information content information end.
So if you're listening carefully, you'd probably notice that sounded exactly the same as the previous example, and you'd be absolutely right. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that all or most HTML elements have roles natively, and in HTML5, the ARIA roles are available just in the HTML5 code. So the header element is mapped natively to the banner landmark role. The main element maps natively to the main role, and of course the footer to the content info role. So it means you don't need to add the roles in manually because the work has already been done for you by the HTML and by the browser. I will say for the moment though, it's probably still a good idea to add in the roles manually. It's a belt and braces technique, but useful for the simple reason that browsers and assistive technologies in turn were quicker off the mark at supporting ARIA than they were the new HTML5 elements. So there's still a variety of slightly older browsers and screen readers that will support the ARIA but not the new HTML5 elements. So just to make sure you're capturing good backwards compatibility in the widest possible audience, it's still worth applying those roles manually for now. There is one exception when you're applying the roles manually though. The header and footer, if they appear as the child element of another HTML5 sectioning element, the example on screen is the article element, you don't want to apply the landmark roles manually. Reason being is that in the native HTML semantics, the landmark roles are only mapped to the header and footer elements when they're the children of the body element. If they're children of any other element, that's not the case. So you don't want to force that by applying the roles manually. Okay, let's take a look at a navigation pattern and walk this way, if you will. We're going to look at an example here, which at first glance might look like a pretty reasonable design pattern. We've got an HTML5 nav element, contains a list with the role of navigation, and one list item, obviously representing where your navigation list would go. This is how a screen reader would handle this, though.
Navigation region. Navigation region. Bullet link. Home. Navigation region end. Navigation region end.
So you'll hear that the navigation region start and end is announced twice. And although the list item with the link in it is mentioned, the list itself isn't acknowledged by the screen reader at all. So clearly something a bit peculiar going on here, and the right information not being exposed to the assistive technology and therefore to the user. And basically the problem with that previous example was that the role was in the wrong place. It had been applied to the unordered list element instead of the nav element. Nav natively maps to the navigation role in HTML5, and I mentioned that relationship before. By putting that role on the list instead, two things happened. We duplicated that landmark role on the page, once for the nav element and once for the list, but we also overrode the list semantics. So if you remember back to the web accessibility stack and information being exposed from the DOM through the accessibility API, that much would have said that the UL was a list. But because we overrode that with ARIA, actually what the screen reader picked up on was that it wasn't a list at all, it was a navigation element, and things got very confusing. If we put the role in the right place on the nav element, this is how a screen reader would announce it.
Navigation region. List of one item. Bullet link. Home. List end. Navigation region end.
So now a screen reader user knows that they're in a navigation region. That navigation contains a list that in this case contains one item, and then they get the list and the link, and then they know when both of those things end. So it's much cleaner, less duplication, and much more informative. And that's a lot of why HTML5 and ARIA is incredibly important to screen reader accessibility. That's very much what the screen reader depends on for its information, and that's of course what the user depends on in order to get around. So let's take a look at live regions. These are really useful. I've chosen Atomic by Blondie as the rock and roll track, and hopefully the reason will become clear in a minute. On screen now, we've just got a very simplified version of a shopping basket. The product is tequila, why not, and a button to add it to a basket, and then just after that, a basket summary that informs the user how many items they've currently got. Now, in a real web page, of course, these things would probably be quite widely separated. The chances are the button would be in the middle of the page about the product, but the basket summary perhaps in the header area or tucked elsewhere. The problem with this example is a fundamental behavior of screen readers. They can only focus on one thing at a time. So in this instance, if you want to activate the button, as a screen reader user, you've got to be focused on the button, which means you're not focused on the basket summary, and therefore you're completely unaware that anything is changing. A bit like this.
Add to basket button. Enter.
So the screen readers hit the add to basket button with the enter key. You could hear that being echoed back. But assuming that the transaction had been successful, the item had been added to the basket, completely unaware that anything had happened. But we can add in some ARIA, of course we can. In this case, we can turn the basket summary into a live region. And what a live region does is say to a screen reader that when the content in this region changes, notify the user, announce the changed content to them. So we use the ARIA live attribute to set the live region, and it can take one of two properties, polite or assertive. Polite means the screen reader will usually finish what it's currently doing before alerting the user to the change. Assertive means it'll be a little bit more pushy about doing that, so it'll just wait for the first break in what the user's doing before making the announcement. It's worth knowing for historical reasons that there was actually another value, appropriately named rude, which would interrupt the screen reader immediately, no matter what it was doing, no matter how focused the user was, and interrupt them with the announcement. And that proved to be such a dreadful user experience that thankfully it was taken out of the spec. We've chosen assertive here because it's pretty important that the user knows that their basket summary is updated as soon as that happens. The other attribute, and here's where the rock and roll choice comes in, is ARIA Atomic. And with this set to true, it says to the screen reader that when any part of the content in this live region is changed, announce all of the content to the user. So in this case, we're only updating the number of items in the basket, but if the screen reader were just to announce 1 or 2 with no context, it wouldn't be particularly meaningful. So we're getting the whole of the text and the number change to be announced. So it would work a little bit like this.
Add to basket button. Enter. Your basket contains 1 item.
So from the screen reader UX point of view, you're still focused on the button. You've just hit it to add the tequila to your basket. But without changing your focus, you've been alerted to the fact that that was successful and that you now have the item in your basket. And there are lots of different ways you could use this. Stock tickers, updating results from sports matches, anything that kind of requires updating. One caveat, keep content in a live region short and sweet. I have seen some examples where pretty much the whole content of a page was wrapped in a live region. And the last thing you want your screen reader to do when you're focused somewhere else is start reading you pages and pages of content. So live regions are great as alerts. Just keep them short and sweet to notify people that something has changed or something has happened. Last pattern I want to have a look at today, and this is certainly one that's really popular across the web. I've titled it, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, because actually it brings together a lot of the ARIA that we've talked about so far and a few new bits and pieces. So using a tabbed widget is really common, especially when real estate is at a premium on web pages. And the typical HTML structure for doing it would be to use an unordered list, each list item representing one of your tabs, and then some divs to represent the content area for each of those tabbed interfaces. From a screen reader user's point of view, this is great, but what you get is a list with a couple of links in that lead to content elsewhere on the page, and then a couple of spaces with some content in. So whereas that's possible to access, it's not very understandable in terms of the interaction that's expected of you, and it doesn't really convey much about the widget as a whole. So let's start off with some ARIA roles. We can add the role of tab list to the unordered list. In the navigation example, I mentioned that it was generally a bad idea to override the natural native semantics of an element. There are exceptions, few and far between, but this is one of them. The reason why it's acceptable in this case is because a list is a collection of list items, and the role we're overwriting it with is tab list, and a tab list is a collection of tabs. So whether your screen reader supports ARIA and you get the tab list information, or it doesn't and it falls back to the HTML, you're still told that you're dealing with a collection of objects. To follow on with that logic, we add a role of tab to each of the links to indicate to screen reader users that those are tabs. And then if we move on to the actual divs where the tab content will be held, we give each of those a role of tab panel. So we've got three roles that come together to create this particular widget: tab list, tab, and tab panel. And we need to start creating some further relationships between those things. Okay, and the first thing we can do is to add another role, actually, of presentation to the list items. And this is so that if you have a screen reader that supports ARIA, so you're picking up on all the tab list and tab semantics, you don't also need to know about the list items. So role of presentation just takes that list item out of the equation for ARIA-supported screen readers, but of course still leaves the HTML intact for screen reader users who don't have ARIA support. In terms of the other ARIA, we're going to add the ARIA selected attribute in to the links that represent the tabs. And when the first tab is selected, we've given it a value of true. As the other tab in this example was selected, your scripting would need to update those values. So only one tab at a time would ever have ARIA selected equals true set. The others would be false. And that pretty much does what it says on the tin. It tells screen reader users which of the tabs is currently selected. Then we can add a little bit more ARIA in. And we can add in ARIA controls. And what ARIA controls does is set up a relationship between the tab, so the bit that you click on or you activate with your keyboard, and the actual content that it displays. We just do this by hooking up the ID value of the tab panel with the ARIA controls attribute on the link. As last little bit of the things that we can do, I said this was really going to bring lots of things together. We can just make sure that the tab panel, the content of the tab itself, has an accessible name, and we just use the ARIA labeled by attribute to do that. And because the content of the link, i.e. the tab text, if you like, is already visible on the page, we can just hook it up using ARIA labeled by using the ID value. So there's a lot of stuff coming together in that. So what I'd like to do is show you a demo. This is taken from some jQuery UI demos that my friend and colleague Hans Hillen did a lot of work on a few years ago, and one of the best examples still in terms of how it works.
Tab control. Docs tab selected 1 of 3. Cats tab selected 2 of 3. Sheep tab selected 3 of 3. Sheep property page expanded. Domestic sheep are quadrupedal. Ruminant mammals typically kept as livestock.
And so there, what you heard was, as the screen reader moved through the tabs, it said tab 1 of 3, tab 2 of 3, tab 3 of 3. So that's the collection semantics coming through. You know, you're dealing with a collection and how many there are in the collection. And then as the screen reader selected one of those tabs, focus moved straight into the content area, and that happens through the ARIA controls relationship. And we were told that that had expanded, so we knew that content had been brought into display. And then it just started to read the content within the tab panel. So what went from being just a couple of links in a list with some content farther down the page now becomes a much more cohesive interaction from a screen reader user's point of view. Just to wrap up, a couple of resources which I really recommend you take a look at, apart from the specs themselves. There's an ARIA authoring practices, which has these design patterns and lots more. They'll cover pretty much everything you think you could do with ARIA and a bit more besides. And also a guide to using White ARIA in HTML, available from W3C and edited by Steve Faulkner, Jez Lemon and Hans Hillen. And on that note, I think school's out, pending any questions.
Thank you, Henny. Right, Henny, sorry. Oh, Leonie. More coffee, I'm sorry. All right. Right, I'm going to have a look through the chat to pick out anything, but if there's any burning questions that I'm not seeing, please just type them in again. Right, I'll just go from the bottom. We've got a question here from Livia Mondini. What editor would you use to work with ARIA? I'm assuming like text editor to do coding itself.
Whatever editor you use to do your HTML in, it's just, you know, part and parcel of coding HTML. I mean, I happen to use one called Edit Plus because it works nicely with my screen reader. I think NoteTab is another one that's kind of popular, but you know, if whatever you code HTML in, you can just add the ARIA into.
There's a lot of activity. Things are flying past me here, so just bear with me. Question here from Graham Armfield. How important is changing the key functionality in tab lists, using left-right to change between tabs?
It's really important. It comes back to the point I made earlier in the talk about needing to provide keyboard handling. So if you come across a tabbed interface in a software application, the customary keystrokes to move between the tabs, once you're focused on them, is to use your left and right keys, or in some instances your up and down arrow keys. In the web, of course, we need to add that functionality in, and it really can help feel more, or make the widget feel more familiar, if you like.
Question from Maya S. Do you have a suggestion on the best, in inverted commas, screen reader to use to test websites? I use Chromebox and it's free and fairly easy to get a grip on. Is that a decent screen reader to use?
I always hesitate to say which is the best one, because there are really good free options pretty much for all platforms. If you develop and you use Chrome, Chromebox is a great option to use. If you develop on Windows but prefer not to use Chrome, NVDA is an excellent choice. NVDA particularly in Windows when you're testing content with Firefox and IE. If you have a Mac, of course, you've got VoiceOver built in. Just hit Command F5 and turn it on. If you're a Linux developer with one of the distros that supports it, Orca is a good screen reader. So there's really something for every platform. So, you know, just play around with whichever one suits the environment you happen to work in.
Quite a specific question here from Sharon Austin. In an earlier screen, when you had the example of ARIA assertive and you had a basket with one item, what happens after a user presses the enter key? Does it act like a tab key?
No, so when someone hits the enter key, and this is irrespective of accessibility, some JavaScript functionality will kick in to add one item to your basket and to update the information that's in the live region. And as soon as that information is updated in the live region, a screen reader will pick up on that change and just announce the change straight to the user without them having to do anything at all. So they don't have to move their focus, they don't have to execute any keystrokes, nothing at all. As soon as they hit the button to add the product, that live region should kick in and the screen reader should announce the change.
Question here from Richard Morton. Is an ARIA live region a good approach for form errors?
No. Reason being that because from a screen reader user point of view, your focus doesn't move. When you announce form errors, if you put them in a live region, your screen reader would announce them as they appeared on the page. But if you imagine there were maybe 6 or 7 errors in that form field, you've got to kind of commit them all to memory or go and find the area of the page where the live region is. I'd recommend for form errors actually using either just a straightforward alert and taking focus to it. So just a div, maybe use the group role to indicate to screen reader users that there's sort of a theme to the content contained within the div. Put a heading within the div, and then maybe take focus to that heading, and then underneath that list each of the errors with the different fields. And if you can, make each error a link down to the corresponding offending form field. So from keyboard user's point of view, you can just use that link and then head straight down to the form field that needs attention. So short answer is move focus to errors with form fields, because then someone can kind of browse through them and peruse them and deal with them one at a time.
Got another possibly rhetorical question from Richard Morton. Will Dragon Naturally ever support ARIA?
I hope so, because it means all their customers at the moment are missing out on a lot of really useful and interesting stuff. Really simple example actually is that button example I looked at right back at the beginning, where we added role of button to a span. And much as a screen reader, of course, will identify that as a button, speech recognition user won't recognize it as a button. And if you've styled that span to look like a button, the chances are a speech recognition user will say something like click on next button because it looks like a button. But of course, their tool won't recognize that command because fundamentally under the hood, it isn't a button, even with that role applied. So I can only hope that all speech recognition tools get their act together soon and start implementing some support.
Right, any more questions, anybody? Or have I missed one out as I was scrolling over? Please just paste it again if I have.
I'm on Twitter anyway, so if anybody thinks of any questions later on, feel free to ping me.
You live on Twitter, don't you?
Everybody's got to be somewhere.
Sorry, I missed out a question here from Sarah Horton. If someone has never used ARIA and had to choose one thing, what should it be?
Great question. Thanks, Sarah. It depends what you're building. Don't use ARIA for ARIA's sake. Look at what you're building, what you're creating, and then look to see how ARIA can be used to make it more accessible. So it all sort of comes together. So unless you're doing something very simple like that old favorite button role, the chances are you're going to need a sprinkling of roles and states and properties. So start with whatever it is you want to build. Use the authoring practices document. I posted the link to see if there are any recommended design patterns, keyboard handling patterns, and take it from there and just have a go.
Right, cool. I think if there's no more questions, just waiting to see if somebody types crazily. No, they're all just berating me for mumbling. That's okay.
There is one more resource actually I'd recommend, is a website called haydenworks.com. Hayden's doing a talk later on for us today. It's HEYDONWORKS.com. But he's got some really useful ARIA in action examples and articles on his blog, which are well worth checking out too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great resource. Adrian was quicker than me on putting the URL in the chat. Right, I think if there is nothing more coming from the chat, no more questions, we may dismiss you in that case.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everybody.